Hello, everybody, and welcome to my presentation. My name is Alvaro Moreno. I'm a postdoctoral researcher working right now at the University Carlos III in Madrid. Today, I'm going to present to you the work that I did during my postdoctoral research period at MIT in the Varanasi Research Group. This project has been sponsored by HELD, and it's about transient effects due to gas depletion during carbon dioxide electroreduction. So let's go into it. Mostly today's research is focused on the catalyst part of this electrochemical process, which means that it's mostly focusing on the material of choice, the architecture of that material, if it has nanostructures, nanopillars, nanopores, and of course that choice is going to be essential to determine the products of this electrochemical reaction process, this CO2 electroreduction. But however, the problem resides not in the catalysis part of the reaction, but the overall efficiency is actually affected by how the reactant is transferred to the electrode in order to react. So the bottleneck resides in the absorption in the liquid media and the transfer of that gas through the liquid media towards the electrode. So in terms of measuring that efficiency, we're going to be using the Faraday efficiency, which is a ratio between the partial current dedicated to generate a certain product divided by the total current applied to the system. Ideally, the summatory of all the Faraday efficiencies should be 1, but experimentally, normally it's not, just because we are adding some experimental, let's say, limitations that we are gonna compromise the reaching 1 level. So normally it's acceptable that a value within the 20% of that unity it's considered correct. So let's go into the catalyst that we're going to be using for our experiment. So we have chosen 3 of them, the so-called Connage metals. So first, we're going to be talking about copper. Copper is a very accessible material, and it provides the widest variety of products from this CO2 electroreduction. So mostly those are liquids and gaseous products, which are formate, ethylene, ethanol, propanol, carbon monoxide, etc. And we have also selected gold and silver. Those 2 are selected because they are very, very, very selective to carbon monoxide. That means that it's going to be easy to analyze the data from our experiment, as we are going to explain later on. So in terms of the ways in which we can transport that gaseous reactant towards the electrode surface, we have 3 different methodologies. First is the headspace. So headspace means that we have a bulk electrolyte in which we have the CO2 dissolved, saturated solution, and we just let it flow by diffusion. Not even flow, let's let it transfer by diffusion. In case that we have nanostructures on our materials, those nanostructures are going to be able to capture the CO2 in areas close to the electrode surface, and that's going to facilitate, and it's going to increase the efficiency of the chemical reaction because of that excess of CO2 in areas close to the electrode. And currently, basically, the most novel technology that we found in the literature is the gas diffusion electrode, which basically consists of on a 3-phase system in which we let the gas diffuse through the electrode and react readily on the spot where it meets the 3-phase of solid, the electrode, liquid, the electrolyte, and gas, no, the CO2. And parallel to this CO2 electrochemical reaction, we find that we are producing hydrogen as well. Hydrogen comes from a water splitting parallel reaction that is occurring at the same time. So we are dedicating partial current to convert water into hydrogen. So that's a way of measuring the efficiency of the overall chemical reaction, because if we are investing current into generate hydrogen, we are not investing that current into generate CO2 products. So basically the target here will be to maximize the CO2 conversion and obtain carbon products and minimize the hydrogen coevolution. So for that, we're going to use our experimental setup, which it will be consisting of an H cell in which we have a saturated bulk electrolyte consisting of a 0.1 molar KOH solution, a bicarbonate solution, and we are going to be having 2 kinds of products here. So basically we have gases that we're going to measure by gas chromatography, and liquids where we are going to measure by nuclear magnetic resonance. So in terms of the silver and gold electrodes, as I said, they are very selective to carbon monoxide, and they are also producing hydrogen at the same time. No? So this simplifies the formula because everything will be just simplified to two components, carbon monoxide and hydrogen. So Faraday efficiencies, there are only two components, two partial products. So the summatory of the two Faraday efficiencies should be close to 1. So if we divide those two Faraday efficiencies, we find that that's equivalent to a division of the two partial currents, which according to Faraday's law can be simplified to a ratio of the two molar concentrations, which is actually a measurement that we can directly obtain from the GC, from the gas chromatographer. So this is actually a very nice way to obtain fast results from to see the overall chemical efficiency from our reaction. And these are the results. Mostly from these graphs, I want you to take the following. Both silver and gold electrodes have the same tendency. Over time, the Faraday efficiency of carbon products decrease a lot as compared to one of the hydrogen products, which increase over time. So that horizontal line that you can see over there, it's a minimally viable threshold. That means that that level is at the one that we are producing the same carbon product than the same hydrogen. Of course, it's not an acceptable level because we want always to be over the top, but it's a minimal that we need to keep guarantee for our reaction to occur in an efficient manner. So we can see that we are mostly talking about the first 100 seconds of reaction here. And of course, as we increase the current density, we decrease the time that we need to take to cross that threshold. Why? Because the higher the current, the higher the consumption of the CO2. And the higher the consumption of the CO2, the higher the depletion. And that means that we have less reactant to make the reaction possible, and the faster we get to the point in which we are not anymore in the minimally viable chemical efficiency. So you can see the crossing time over there, and you can see that the crossing time decreases with the current density. So for copper electrodes, you can see that there is a wide variety of products that we can obtain over here. You see that level of reaching the 100 Faraday efficiency, but not always 100, but always around the level. And mostly, I want you to take home the message that, of course, the more energy we put into the system, the more likelihood that we are gonna have to obtain high carbon products like propanol, acetaldehyde, acetone. As we go by in time, that energy input into the system is decreasing just because we have less CO2 available to react. As we are having less CO2 available to react, the system is going to move towards easier and lighter carbon products, like for example, formate. Or in terms of gases, it's going to be more stable to generate carbon monoxide and to generate, for example, ethylene. Why? Because ethylene is heavier; it has more carbon products. But overall, the picture on the right, we are increasing at all times the hydrogen evolution. It's increasing a lot as compared to the carbon products, which is increasing always over time. However, take into account that the Faraday efficiency for higher carbon products is always going to decrease way faster than for single carbon products. And we can see that at the very beginning of the reaction, when we have the most concentration of the CO2, we have higher concentration of high carbon products, and that's going to change over time. So for modeling this in a mathematical way, we are going to talk with the fundamental chemistry equations, which are the ones that you have here. And those ones are tabulated, are standard chemical equations. So you can find them in the literature. And we have known parameters, pressure, temperature, and concentration of electrolyte. Basically, it's a 0.1 molar KOH solution. If we solve these equations, we can see that we obtain a pH of 6.79. pH is going to be a critical measurement technique. Not a measurement technique, but a critical way of measuring the concentration of CO2 into our solution, because pH is sensitive to that CO2 change. But it's not only sensitive to the CO2 change, it's also sensitive to the change of hydroxide ions concentration. And when are we producing hydroxide ions? When the reaction is happening, because we need hydroxide ions. They are released every time that we are converting CO2 into other products. So during the reaction, there is an increase in the hydroxide ion concentration, and that's going to affect all the different equilibrium concentrations of other ions as well, together, parallel to the decrease in the concentration of carbon dioxide. And that's going to affect overall the pH measurement of our solution. So for modeling the depletion, we have that the production rate is Faraday's law, and Fick's law because everything is being modeled by diffusion alone. So we have boundary conditions. At the beginning, we don't have any change in concentration. Far away from the electrode, we don't see any change, and the electrode is behaving like a sink. So at the end, we have that the concentration change goes with the complementary error function. So these are actually pH measurements from our experiments. You see, far away from the electrode, no change, constant at all times. And at the level of 6.79, which is our equilibrium level. But close to the electrode, you see that it's changing and it's increasing over time. And you see that sudden drop. The sudden drop occurs when we stop the reaction. And actually, our mathematical model follows like that. So at the very beginning, we are able to see parallel that we're modeling our system parallel to the real pH measurement. That gap in between is the component that has the extra hydroxide ions that are being released into the solution because of the reaction happening. But when we stop the reaction and everything drops, you see that the point in which our mathematical model hits the experimental model, it's the point where we are measuring the actual value of the CO2 concentration into the solution at that time, because there is not anymore a component of the hydroxide ions being released. It's only depletion, gas depletion. And we can model as well the concentration. With silver, we do the same. We increase the current density. The higher we deplete, the higher the CO2 is being consumed. Of course, the higher the level of the pH probe, just because we are having more ions, more hydroxide ions being released into the system because of the higher current. But the moment that we stop the reaction, the level drops and it hits the theoretical formula at the point where we are measuring gas depletion, the consumption of the CO2 level. The same happens with gold for this case. It's a very similar behavior. So what's the way to counteract this? So for that, we're going to do pulse CDR, pulse electrochemical reduction of CO2. That means that we're going to turn the system on and off, and we're going to let it rest for a certain amount of time. So as you can see in the black curve, this is the continuous CDR reaction. And on blue, you see that what happens when we turn on and off for 7 minutes. So you see that we are increasing, we are improving the overall chemical efficiency, and also that the pH is decreased over time as compared to the continuous form. That means because we're depleting less our reaction. If we increase the resting time, we get even better capabilities, even better performance. And when we let it rest for way longer times, definitely we are improving a lot the overall chemical reaction efficiency, in which this moment we don't even reach the minimal viable threshold over there. We are always performing in an efficient way, so to call it. So what's the drawbacks and the improvements here? So we are increasing a lot the power investment. That means that we are converting way more CO2 into other useful products, carbon products, with the same current applied to the system, but we are reducing a lot the production rate. Why? Because at minimal half of the time, the system is resting, it's not performing any chemical reaction. So, conclusions. CO2 electrochemical reaction is limited by the gas availability to the electrode. Hydrogen convolution, unfortunately for today, is unavoidable, but we can try to diminish it as much as possible. For the depletion around the CO2, the depletion of CO2 around the electrode is the cost for the increase in the H2 convolution. We have less CO2 available. We are investing our current to just water splitting. And the pH provides an accurate means of measuring the gas concentration, and our method provides a good model to take into account that change in the concentration of CO2 close to the electrode. And with pulse CDR, we are able to improve the power investment, but we decrease a lot the production rate. So we need to find a compromise solution in that aspect. This future flow cells with combined with gas diffusion electrode seems to be the proper way and the right track to follow in terms of improving the overall chemical efficiency, because we don't have that effect of gas depletion. We don't have the effect of a quiescent performance, a quiescent structure, a device. because everything is flowing. So every time the CO2 is being replenished. So thank you very much. And I would like to accept your questions. Hope you have a great day.